Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Why don't they tell us the facts? That's what an awful lot of people are saying about the referendum campaign. Well, now a group of senior academics has produced a report with the fact-checking organisation FullFact that confirms people are right to be concerned. I'm joined by Will Moy, who is the director of FullFact. And as I understand it, Mr. Moy, you investigated 24 claims from both sides in the referendum, and many of them were found wanting.
That's right. What we looked for was 12 of the biggest issues that keep coming up in the debate, things like immigration and border control and how much it's going to cost the economy or benefit the economy, where the sides seem to be clashing with one another. And then FullFact's about getting the best experts in the country to give us the best information we can. So we found this group of professors and said, can you help us fact check these claims?
And on immigration, for instance, let's just look at what the Leave camp is claiming, which is that Brexit, and I quote, is the only way we can control immigration.
And that's true. If we stay in the EU, we have very limited control of immigration from the rest of the EU because EU citizens have a right to work and live in any EU country. But the question is, what happens if we leave? And there are two reasons to think if we do leave, we won't get as much control of immigration as that implies. The first one is simply that if you apply the same rules we currently apply to people from outside the EU to people from inside the EU, then we wouldn't expect to see it falling to the government's target level of tens of thousands. Migration Watch did what they would call a ballpark estimate of a reduction of only 100,000 out of 300,000 in immigration. But the other
still a drop.
It's still a drop, but if your target is what the government says it is, it's not going to get you there. But the other reason is actually, do we have the freedom to cut it that much? Well, if we want to stay in the European Economic Area and stay part of a single market, we wouldn't have that freedom based on what other countries have done. Norway has to accept free movement in order to stay part of a single market. So simply leaving the EU might not be enough to give us control of immigration.
But if they were to argue, well, it would help?
They could argue that, but we won't know. And what they can't argue is it is clear that we can have both the ability to be part of a single market and the ability to do what we like on immigration. So it's not that there's nothing to the arguments, it's that sometimes you seem to need a decoder ring. And I don't want people waking up on June the 24th thinking, I made my mind up, and now I feel like I've had the wool pulled over my eyes.
Is it possible to say it's much more difficult for Vote Leave to scare us with statistics? Because at least with Remain, we know where we are because we've had the last 50 years, whatever, to check things against. We know what is going on.
Well, I mean, two things there. Firstly, I don't think there is such a thing as a status quo in this referendum. The EU is going to change very significantly over the next 10 and 20, 30 years, just as leaving the EU would see very significant change. So the idea that we can opt into what we have now is probably not plausible. But also, actually, the Remain campaign has been pushing some very hard claims that don't stand up to scrutiny either. Some of their claims about border security, for example. You know, we benefit as EU member state from cooperating with other EU countries on border security. Absolutely, that's true. Things like the European arrest warrant that we opted into, the Schengen information system, which is information sharing about borders, that we opted into. But Norway has opted into the Schengen information system, although it's not an EEA member, and has something that looks an awful lot like the European arrest warrant. So again, the question of what would happen if we actually leave doesn't really stack up as quite so frightening as one of the campaigns.
And on the other big one, we haven't got long enough to deal with this. You could talk for hours, I accept that. But nonetheless, treaties, trade treaties.
Oh, crikey, yes.
That'll do it. Oh, crikey!
Yes, I mean it's a matter of professional judgment as to what will happen in the future as to what can be negotiated on trade treaties. But it is clear, I think, that The big one is what deal we do with the rest of the European Union. And the thing that gets hidden on both sides is that what deal we do on trade will be linked to what deal we can do on immigration and lots of other topics as well. So when you hear people saying this is where the gravy is on any particular part of the issue, you've got to want to pin them down on all the rest of the issue. And that's why we need the facts behind the claims.
Will Boyd, thank you very much.
Thank you.